We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. It's Tuesday, January 20th, 2026. Thanks for joining us today on rumble.com/AmradPod and also YouTube, the American Radicals Podcast. I'm coming to you live at 12 Eastern Time from the frozen tundra that is my home in Florida. So I normally like to ask people to do all the things like share, subscribe, thumbs up, whatnot. But today I'm willing to make a trade. Just after the show, go outside and spray an aerosol can till the point that it's empty. I want global warming to come back because it is way too cold in Florida. What are we talking about today, guys? Today is going to be working our way through the stages of grief through the eyes of a new Republican, new Trump supporter who is very disappointed. And I think he has good reason to be disappointed because the DOJ is still fighting Epstein transparency. The Trump economy 1 year in, an assessment, it's not so good. There's still no coronavirus justice that we were promised. Bread and circus from our elected officials. And our president is going to the World Economic Forum. So we're going to get to all of it. Let's get after it. The stages of grief. First, there's denial, then there's anger, then there's bargaining, depression, and then finally acceptance. I kind of think that my oldest son experienced just about all of them in one afternoon over the weekend. He's a Buffalo Bills fan. I don't know why he likes to pick teams that play in bad weather, but that's the choice that he's gone with. And they lost over the weekend. And, he's 11, so he hasn't had to experience that much disappointment in life as a sports fan. Certainly doesn't remember 4 straight Super Bowl losses on behalf of the Bills Mafia. And I watched him go through it all because, I'm not real happy with the NFL in my house. I don't like being reminded that we have to end racism because it's apparently my fault that St. George Floyd died of a fentanyl overdose. And that gets shoved down my throat as I watch the game. And I gave him 1 day, 24-hour rule, to get from the denial that his team just lost to accepting it. And he went through all those various stages as an 11-year-old is actually able to do emotionally at that standpoint. And I think he's moved on. I think he's anxiously anticipating the draft and then the next season, which hopefully his team will do well next year. But I want to take that comparison to that of a new Republican, a new Trump supporter who I saw an online post from. And the best that I'm able to ascertain from this guy, I don't know him, but he seems to be, and I'll take everything he says at face value, a former Democrat, former liberal who was part of the big tent brought in during the most recent presidential election cycle and was excited to come to the polls and vote for Donald Trump and the promises that he made. And he kind of put out this long post on Twitter. It's got some naughty language, and I will do my best to clean it up. But I want to start the conversation out today with all the topics we're going to get to, but just working our way through this and seeing the righteous indignation, because he seems to be in this grief sandwich where the denial portion of it, he's kind of over that, and he hasn't gotten to the acceptance because he hasn't lived with the Republican Party, which I think most people in the American Radicals Podcast audience would align mostly with, kind of like Richard Gere, Officer and a Gentleman. You have nowhere else to go. But he's still dealing with anger for sure. He's bargaining with them, making suggestions about ways that they could actually improve things. And he's going to find himself in a depressed state towards the end of this post. So let me bring it up and we'll work our way through just some excerpts. It's very long. I won't do all of it, but it is worth going through some of it. And this guy's name is Matt Van Swol. At Matt Van Swol, Swol spelled S-W-O-L. And I said some naughty language there, but I will do my best to redact those portions. I'm effing sick and tired of the GOP pretending like they can't do anything. Are you not paying attention at all to what's happening? If Democrats win the midterms, it's over. No DOGE cuts, no executive orders codified, no election integrity laws, no opportunity to cut legislative regulations. And guess what happens after that? They start passing bills. They actually do everything you won't do. And that's kind of a simple assessment that I've made before. Republicans get elected to be something. Democrats, they get elected to do something. Democrats, I mean communists. They seize institutional power. They're happy to do that. They like to get into the local school board or the city council. If they're able to elevate beyond that, they go to your state house. To get beyond that, they go to Congress, the House, the Senate, and they make no secret about what they are going to do. And then they actually follow through on it, and their voter base demands it. Even if they don't have institutional power, the voter base demands that they do something, and that's when they get very theatrical and they go out and scream and holler. And we've got an example of that later in the show. But Matt Vance Wall, I think he's standing on firm ground because the minority leader within the Senate right now, Chuck Schumer, former Senate Majority Leader, has been very clear about what they intend to do. And I've got a nice video. In his own words, Chucky Schumer.
If you look at the budget actually we're working on right now, and we'll have the T-HUD budget, transportation and HUD budget, we restore most of the cuts and even go higher than previous years on many of the programs that DOGE slashed. When I met our nominee for HUD secretary, then he was nominee, he talked a nice game, but he doesn't seem to have the clout to make those views prevail over the DOGE people, over the cut people. But we have worked really hard in the budget and gotten bipartisan support to increase these amounts and undo a lot of the cuts, which are essential.
They're going to do away with the DOGE cuts. That'll happen first thing next year in January, when the Republicans are no longer the majority party in the House and the Senate, if the midterms go the way that they're trending to be. Now let's go back to Matt Van Swoll, who continues to express his dismay, but also start the bargaining process as he's working his way into a lather of depression because he's being disappointed by these Republican Party for the first time. And I don't hate him for that. He just hasn't had the experience. He's like my 11-year-old who didn't see the Buffalo Bills lose 4 straight Super Bowls. Quote from Matt Vance Wall. All of this is on the table and you do nothing to try to stop the absolute bleep storm that is about to befall you? The playbook is obvious. It's staring you in the face, yet you are content to take long vacations, make TikTok content, and do podcasts and write X posts blaming Democrats. We do not give a single bleep about your content. We want you to deliver results. We can't do anything is no longer a valid excuse for your pathetic performance. It's just a confession that you don't care enough to try. And I'm telling you right now, our collective patience for all this bleep is gone. And Trump won't be there to save you either when it's election time and you ask us for votes and we ask you for your record. That's pretty well said. And that's a pretty good sentiment that he has. I think that there's a large contingency of people who were very excited to vote for Donald Trump in 2016, 2020, 2024. It seems to grow. That snowball keeps going down the hill. Get a little bit more and more and more each time. Look, I'm on record. I didn't vote for Donald Trump in 2016 or 2020. I voted for him in 2024. It was transactional. I basically voted for him so that Steve Baker would get pardoned, but you can't argue that I was part of that coalition. I can't complain if it's transactional, but I kind of can. I was hopeful that there would be more, and we just haven't seen it. And that doesn't fall completely at the feet of the president. There's 3 co-equal branches of government. The legislature, the Republicans have majorities in both houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, and they've done precisely nothing, or just about that, with the control and the power that the American people gave them when we sent the mandate in 2024 that we wanted certain things. So let's go over some of the failures, some of the reasons that we have righteous indignation and anger and frustration, and then why we have reason to be depressed, because we're not only not getting the results, but we're getting a lot of other things that were diametrically opposed to the viewpoints that were expressed in the lead up to the last election cycle. So first, let's keep it in the executive branch. Let's stay at the Department of Justice because there was a mandate clearly sent, and there was a lot of words spoken by candidates for office that were, we are promising you transparency, not coded language for things we like, but actual transparency about a very specific thing. And that was Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not coming off it. I don't care wherever the news cycle goes. No matter what the rationale is, I don't care if it's for intelligence purposes, foreign policy, diplomacy, economic reasons, or just because you want to look out for your buddies. Whatever the rationalization is, it has to end with the following suffix to the sentence. So that's why we let the elite pedophile rapists go free. And the American people demand not just transparency, but there's an accompanying portion to that, and that's accountability. And I don't think we're going to see either in light of what the DOJ is now fighting for. So this is a letter that the DOJ submitted to the court, pushing back on the Epstein Transparency Act that was passed unanimously through the U.S. Senate and nearly unanimously through the U.S. House and signed immediately by the President of the United States. So it isn't, again, in one branch of government, it's two, both the legislature and the executive branch. A little hard to read here, but I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. The DOJ is moving to block an independent monitor in the Ghislaine Maxwell case. The U.S. Department of Justice has formally moved to block the appointment of this independent monitor, or as it's called, a special master to oversee the release of the Epstein records. DOJ argues that both Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, they were the big names who went out there and tried to pass and eventually succeeded in passing the Epstein Transparency Act through Congress and having it signed by the president, that Khanna and Massie are asking the court to oversee DOJ document production, compel testimony, and effectively enforce a statute that provides no judicial enforcement mechanism. That's nerdy. But what does it actually mean? It means that the bill, as it was passed and then ratified into law by the president, doesn't have anything to enforce it. There's no teeth actually there. So for all the talk that we see online, the bread and circus that we see on social media and even in mainstream media from elected officials or thought leaders saying, if Pam Bondi doesn't come through, this is going to be grounds for indictment for violating the law. Well, there's no teeth. There's no punishment attached to violating the law that requires her to turn over those documents. So she has no intention of doing that. Effectively, the requirement is going to be back on Congress to pass a new bill, and good luck with that. They're taking lots of vacation time. This is midterm season right now. They have to go back and talk to their constituents and tell them all the great things that they did for them by posting on Twitter in the last year. Do you think we're going to get a new Epstein Transparency Act that actually has teeth and enforcement mechanism that would actually put somebody in jail, somebody from the Department of Justice in jail? If they do you think the Department of Justice, when they get the criminal referral from Congress, is actually going to investigate themselves and determine that they did something wrong that necessitates a prosecution from the DOJ of the DOJ? No, that's never going to happen. We're effectively in a spot now where the DOJ, an arm of the executive branch, has called the bluff of the legislative branch, the co-equal branches of government. They're supposed to grind the gears against each other, but there are mechanisms, some corrective mechanisms. The legislature has one bullet to fire: defund the Department of Justice entirely. Not partially, because money's fungible. They can move it from one to another. Defund the Department of Justice and the FBI, parenthetically, 100%. But we can see the continuing resolutions just pushing on through both houses of Congress to be signed immediately by the president because we can't afford another shutdown. That's not what the American people voted for by majority, right? Donald Trump won the popular vote and the Electoral College. One of the big things was we want transparency and accountability on Epstein, and they haven't delivered it. So you can see why people are getting angry. Now, they'll work their way to depression when they realize that it was all just a show. There's no there because the individuals who promised us transparency, I mean, the current Attorney General of the United States said the Epstein files were on her desk. Not only did she fail, it wasn't a failure. She was never going to follow through. That's the next hurdle you have to get through. There was never an intentionality there to actually turn those documents over for whatever reason. We're not going to know. And I don't know if the Democrats, if and when they get back in charge, are going to follow through on giving us those documents, let alone criminal indictments against the attorney general for not adhering to a law that doesn't have an enforcement mechanism for it. Now, that's Epstein. That's separate. Let's go over to some economic matters. So from the BBC, I've got a couple pieces on that. This one struck my fancy because I have been fired by the FBI 2 times in the last 40 months, so on the job hunt as normal. And it occurred to me that maybe my applications are going to a black hole somewhere, and maybe there's other nefarious reasons for that, which the BBC sort of lays out. So the headline: should more be done to tackle ghost jobs, vacancies that don't exist? Apparently, it's somewhere in the area of 20 to 22%. 1 in 5 jobs that are listed online don't actually exist. And meanwhile, the United States Department, or no, it's the Bureau of Labor Statistics, that's the group that comes out with the unemployment figures and then revises them depending on whether or not they like the president or don't. Apparently, there were 7.2 million job vacancies back in August, but only 5 million were actually filled. So that stands to reason that there's a lot of jobs open that might not actually be jobs. So what are the reasons? Well, some companies just want to aggregate a talent pool for people who might be a good fit. Maybe we can give them a call later on if something opens up. Sometimes it's just that they're incompetent and they forget to take a job posting down. Other companies want to keep putting out job application opportunities out there because they want the public to think, hey, they must be booming. They're hiring, a hiring spree. That's probably a really good company. Maybe if I don't get the job, I could at least invest in it. And then the last one is a little bit more nefarious, and that's to obtain and sell data. So if anybody's actually applied to a job recently, and then all of a sudden you started getting these spam emails that were parenthetically connected to that industry, that's probably what it was. You gave them some of your personal identifying information, even if it's just an email address. And they're going to spam you because they're going to take that information, sell it. They've now made money on you applying to, in good faith, work for that company when there actually wasn't a job available, taken that data, sold it, profited off it, and now you get spammed. So there's actually a push to do something legal about it. And again, we're in this political spectrum. If we lined everybody up on the planet and we said at one end of the spectrum is total government and at the other end of the spectrum is total anarchy, I'm not the last guy on the line near the anarchists, but I'm a couple over from it. I do think we have a place for government here. I think you can make an articulable small r Republican constitutional case that if there's a modicum of fraud involved with stealing people's data so you can profit off of it, maybe there's a position for government here. So this proposal is called the Truth in Job Advertising and Accountability Act, and it calls for expiration dates for job listings, so you can't just be incompetent. And then auditable hiring records. Did you actually hire anybody? And if you didn't, why not? Were you just collecting that data? We'll see if something like that could make its way through Congress, or they're just going to be on vacation too much. Won't hold my breath because unlike my son, I lived through 4 Super Bowls in which the Buffalo Bills lost all of them in a row. And Matt Van Swole, I'm a little bit more hip to what the grand old party, the GOP, led by Mike Johnson and Lindsey Graham, is actually all about. I'm further along the line to acceptance in him, but you could see how anger and perhaps incoming depression could be there. And speaking of depression, we'll stay on the economy. Report from the New York Times, at one point a newspaper and in no way sympathetic to the current administration because it's led by Donald Trump and he's mean, orange, and literally Hitler. So we'll take everything they say here with a healthy grain of salt, but I'm a numbers guy. We're a facts show. It's not your mama's show. It's your daddy's show. So headline from the New York Times reads, Trump said he'd unleash the economy in year 1. Here's how he did. And they give him some different colors and scores. Food prices, gas prices, energy costs, stock market, cutting the debt, all those sorts of things. Red, orange, green being good. And if you're watching us here on rumble.com/amradpod or YouTube, the American Radicals podcast, you see lots of red and orange and only one green. I read it, so you don't have to. I will give you the straight dope and the skinny on the economic production in the first year of the second Trump administration, 2025. Food prices down for a few specific grocery items, but overall food inflation is up. It's actually picked up somewhat since he returned to office. Average price of a gallon of gas was $2.78 in early January, and it's now over $3. So it went up marginally. But in the New York Times, to their credit, they actually put in here that energy experts generally say the president have little control over the price of oil. So fair enough. They give him partial credit. Electricity prices, they are way up residentially. And electricity prices are kind of hard to do nationwide because it's way more contingent on where you are geographically in the country. So doing an overall average is not necessarily the most fair thing to do, but you don't really have a better alternative if you're doing a 30,000-foot view of the overall economy. So residential electricity prices have gone up a lot. And a lot of that has to do with these data centers that we've talked about, the data warehouses, the AI places that have to be kept ridiculously cold because there's so much heat being generated by these computing systems, and they suck up all the electricity that's on the grid and available for those communities to use, and that creates a shortage. And when there's a shortage, that creates an economic condition in which the prices go up because supply is down, prices go up. People need to keep their houses hot in the winter, like right now in Florida, where I had to turn on my heat, ridiculous. Or cold in the summer, which is kind of normal and should be the normal 12 months a year in Florida. But as a result, right now, according to the New York Times, at least, when they analyze the data on this, where they're looking at the Trump economy after year one, residential energy prices are up almost 7%. Now, to employment, the automaking sector, it's fallen. About close to 30,000 jobs were lost in automaking. I thought we were going to bring that stuff back home. Hasn't happened. Similarly, manufacturing employment has been pretty flat. And the one good thing, stocks are up 16%. So if you got a 401k, an individual retirement account, or just buying some mutual funds, 16% is a strong year on record. But does that really hit people in the feels? Particularly if they're going to the grocery store. It's not like you can show the checkout aisle at Walmart when you're buying your yellow tag beef. That's way more expensive than it used to be. How your 401k is doing pretty well. And then the last thing was the Treasury collected a record $264 billion in tariff revenue. Now, we were told that we're going to do away with the income taxes. We're going to fund the government completely on tariffs. 264 billion. I mean, a billion is 1,000 million, but you're dealing with a government that costs in the trillion, and a trillion is 1,000 billion. $7 trillion to fund our government, and you're bringing in $250 billion in tariff revenue. Are we going to scale back government by 15 times? I haven't seen that. In fact, I've seen expansion. I've seen the budget, the continuing resolution, have a baseline where they're actually growing government. Even DOGE cuts are nullified because we spend more on other things. We've seen proposals to bring up the defense budget by $500 billion, which would be double the amount of money that we brought in tariffs. And then there's a messaging component to tariffs in an economy that's dealing with a lot of inflation. The price of food has gone up. The price of gasoline's gone up. The price of energy has gone up. Inflation is actually real. That's because the government has printed so much money that there's too many dollars chasing too few goods, and the dollars that are in your bank account become worth less and worth less until they become worthless. The message has never come out to the American people that, look, we're doing some protectionist strategies. We're using tariffs to make foreign goods more expensive, because we want to entice you to buy American goods. So we will create American jobs. And I mean, it's a little bit of a redistribution of wealth. If you think about it, you're subsidizing American jobs. And I don't know. I mean, that's kind of an argument for free trade, but make the case for protectionism. but make it a non-nerdy case for protectionism. They haven't made the case that it's acceptable to have $22 t-shirts at Walmart because they come from the Philippines, because we want to encourage Americans to buy American. It's a tough case to make when people are having to buy yellow tag beef, that they should also shell out 22 bucks for a t-shirt at Walmart. People are going to be very unhappy with that. They're going to be pretty depressed with that. The economy might actually edge more and more towards an economic depression when you do that. And we're not looking at a finish line anytime soon. It's not like you could snap your fingers and say, look, we brought in these tariffs. Not only are we funding the government because we slashed the government by 95%, never going to happen, but we're not going to build the smokestack manufacturing facilities tomorrow. I mean, if you have a fictional J.D. Vance administration, you're not going to bring those back by the end of his second term. It takes a long time with all the regulations that are in this country to actually build manufacturing plants. Those jobs are not over on the horizon. They're well over the horizon, and those cases haven't been made to the American people, which is why in this immediacy, the culture that we live in, where you're watching Amazon Prime and then they cut away to commercials, and even though you grew up like me in the 80s and the 90s and we sat through commercials all the time, you're a boiled frog at this point, and you get super angry that you had to sit through 63 seconds of commercials. Like, how dare they? Well, those jobs, they're not going to be immediate. They're not going to be the Netflix stream that doesn't have commercials. People aren't going to have patience for that. And that election cycle happens every 2 years. What do you think the odds are that there are people who stood around and stood by the president in the last election, or even came over to his cohort because they were brought over for transactional reasons like real Steve Friend here, or because they believed in the economic vision or the promises that we would see a DOJ that was transparent? Are those people going to stick around, or are they going to be scrolling their phone during the commercial break and happen to see an ad for a Democrat who says things that they like? All right, let's come off of economics and talk about some coronavirus stuff. And I saw this over at the Daily Caller. We wanted accountability. Now, we did get the auto pen pardon for a guy like Anthony Fauci, but the auto pen, I don't think, is the president, and that certainly hasn't been adjudicated in Congress like we were promised, whether or not the auto pen could do those sorts of things. Yet another failure, another reason to be really angry at the Republican Party. So from the Daily Caller, headline, exclusive, Fauci privately called natural immunity data impressive before forcing jabs on Americans. Now, it doesn't just pertain to Anthony Fauci. They actually pull up somebody else from the Center for Disease Control. That is Chief Medical Officer John Brooks. This is a quote from him. Quote, "It seems now from at least 3 very different analyses of different data that vaccine-induced immunity wanes over time, especially that induced by Pfizer, because the Pfizer vaccine sucked, whereas infection-induced may be more durable up to at least 4 to 6 months, and then beyond recognizing that natural immunity, which we were told was a conspiracy theory, unlike any other time in history," he adds, "The good news here is that boosters look like the solution." So his takeaway is just inject more gene juice into your arm. Now, specifically to Anthony Fauci, there was a Freedom of Information Act that the Daily Caller submitted for his emails, and they found this doozy there. And this is what it says, and this is just a quote from the good Dr. Fauci. "The data as reported in the news article, it looked rather impressive despite the caveat that it is a retrospective study and the testing was voluntary. This test from Israel showed that natural immunity was 13 times more effective than their gene juice." He also said, Fauci, "It is conceivable and possibly likely that those who have had serious systemic infection develop a high level of immunity that even surpasses that of full vaccination." Because the good doctor realized that natural immunity is a thing and felt comfortable sending an email out about it, and yet turned right around, because when he sent this email, it was right at the same time that the Biden administration came out with executive orders mandating the jab. Where's the accountability for all of the people who are harmed by that experimental gene juice so that your government that you fund with your money or that you suffer on behalf of through inflation could send billions of dollars to Pfizer when all of the people knew that it not only didn't work, that it was actually dangerous for your health. And beyond just government actors, where's the accountability for the harm that went on from 2020 through 2021, 2022 from our medical community? We were told that they were healthcare heroes, the things that they did. I want some accountability for that because I don't think the auto pen signed any pardons for these people. So this comes from Betrayal Project, betrayalprojectusa.org, and it's a hospital deadly playbook. They list off 25 things that they did from polling thousands of people about their experiences in dealing with hospitals during coronavirus. Just a couple examples, but I'll put the link in the show notes here and you can read them all for yourself. A couple of them. They refused outpatient treatment. Family doctors and urgent care physicians refused to see patients, and they told them to just go home and wait until they couldn't breathe anymore. They isolated people, isolation tactics, because people would be admitted to a hospital and they were denied access to their family and friends, their pastors and their priests. Even they were denied last rites. Vaccination discrimination. People were mocked. They're verbally abused because they didn't get the gene juice. People were denied other alternative treatments like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. Their communications were cut off to the medical staff. Call lights, phones, devices were removed because they didn't want to deal with those people because they weren't vaccinated. They didn't take the mark of the beast. And then they also put people on non-emergency ventilation, which once you get put on a ventilator, it's a coin flip whether or not you're ever going to come off it. But just to preemptively give you that, give your lungs a break. We'll put you on the ventilator knowing that you're kind of a problem person. 50-50 odds that you kick the bucket. That'd be great. Clears the bed up for somebody else who we deem to be more worthy, somebody who's on their 13th or 14th jab at this point. So those are the failures. Those are the shortcomings. Those are the reasons that we had to be really angry. And what are we getting in exchange for that? Well, we're getting lots of bread and circus. I don't like to cover down on this because it's rage porn and it's dumb. And it's not really relevant, but I think it's relevant to the talk today because we're not getting coronavirus accountability. We're not getting the economic output that we are expecting that we were told, but we're getting lots of entertaining news bits and clips because the R's and the D's, they're going to fight it out and they're going to use some naughty language to do it. So Ilhan Omar, she went out in a field hearing, I think as it was billed, and that's because the Democrats don't have the majority. They can't actually hold their own hearing. So they just go out and talk. Ilhan Omar, this is her saying some mean things about the United States of America, which should get you really angry and vote for Lindsey Graham in the midterms.
The one place where we thought we would never experience this is the U.S. goddamn states.
Can you believe it? She used the Lord's name in vain. What could we expect of somebody who doesn't represent 434 districts in the country? But get really angry, chip in $5, $10 to your local Republican to run for office to hold Ilhan Omar accountable. Or, if you can't chip in $5 or $10, at least you can give a like or a share to somebody like Based Mike Lee, the senior senator from the state of Utah, the austere constitutional attorney, the expert, who I actually reached out to for help and wasn't interested. From Mike Lee, no member of Congress should ever refer to our country as the USGD states. What should be the consequence of saying that? He's actually asking for people to comment so that he can grow his account. And then you had the president himself, took to Truth Social, Donald Trump from @RealDonaldTrump. There are $19 billion in Minnesota Somalia fraud. Fake, quote, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, a constant complainer who hates the USA, knows everything there is to know. She should be in jail or even a worse punishment, sent back to Somalia, considered one of the absolutely worst countries in the world. She could help to make Somalia great again. It's just chuckle hut. It's just very funny. It's a give and take. It's a back and forth. It's just rough and tumble politics. Ilhan Omar represents her constituents. That's what they want. They have an opportunity to replace her every 2 years. They vote her in. She's doing the job that they want. They're happy with her. They're not like Matt Van Swoll, who's despondent at this point because, unlike his representatives, she actually follows through on what they want of her. She's in the minority right now, so they want her to just pitch a fit and say some naughty words. But when she gets back into control, she'll refund USAID. She'll weaponize the FBI to go after those anti-government, anti-authority, violent extremists who probably didn't like to wear masks on airplanes and refused to get the gene juice. Her supporters are not disappointed. They're not going through the various stages of grief, or at least that healthy sandwich between the denial and the acceptance portion. What else are we getting? Well, the World Economic Forum is getting ready to meet again here soon in Davos. Everybody excited for that? The World Economic Forum, which represents the globalists. I thought we were going to reject all these people, right? They're no longer in power. We're back. We're based. America's there, folks. Headline from the Associated Press. Inequality and unease are rising as elite Davos event opens with pro-business Trump set to attend. The president's going to Davos. It's actually his third trip there. He's going to speak there, and they don't know if he's going to dress them down. So, I mean, maybe I'm a little bit early on this. Maybe he goes there and calls them all globalists and tells them to go to hell. But you don't know. Why is he going there to begin with? Why is he accepting any invitation to go there? I thought we're about America. Why do you have to go to Davos to find out what this organization thinks about, I don't know, 15-minute cities? Or wealth inequality as they eat duck à l'orange and fly private. I mean, for those who need a reminder, the World Economic Forum put this out, when was it? April of 2018. It's still there. It's hard to find. I saved the link though, and I'll put it in the show notes so you can have it. This is the World Economic Forum's 8 predictions for the world in 2030. Played it before. It's got some nice music behind it. They don't do an audio, so for the audio purposes, I will try to read off what they predict for the globe by 2030, which is in 4 years. You'll own nothing, and you'll be happy. Whatever you want, you'll rent. It'll be delivered by drone. The U.S. won't be the world's leading superpower. A handful of countries will dominate. You won't die waiting for an organ donor. We won't transplant organs, we'll print new ones instead. You'll eat much less meat. Eat the bugs. An occasional treat, not a staple, for the good of the environment and our health. 1 billion people will be displaced by climate change. We'll have to do a better job of welcoming and integrating refugees. Open borders, everyone. Polluters will have to pay to emit carbon dioxide. There will be a global price on carbon. This will help make fossil fuels history. No more jobs coming back to America. You could be preparing to go to Mars. Scientists will have worked out how to keep you healthy in space. Start a journey to find alien life. Well, what is life? Western values will have been tested to the breaking point. Checks and balances that underpin our democracies must not be forgotten. That's that organization that the President of the United States, who for the last 10 years has been saying, make America great again, will be attending and speaking to. All right. I got one more. I alluded to Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, who were big on the Epstein Transparency Act. Now, this is both what are we getting? What are we failing to get from our people? And what we should expect when the other side comes back into power. And I got to give a language warning on this one. Ro Khanna being interviewed by Sean Ryan. I think Sean Ryan actually emotes the proper level of frustration and anger that so many people like the Matt Van Swoll are expressing right now. Their displeasure with what they're seeing. This is Ro Khanna actually arguing for a wealth tax. You think Chuck Schumer might have that one in the hopper? Here he is on the Sean Ryan Show.
ultimately, the idea that having just a 1% tax a year, I mean, in the theory, on building wealth when you make about 10% every year anyway in the stock market, and that you're going to use that to make sure people have health care and childcare and education. I just think that's what's going to prevent a revolution. You know, think about the guys who went in Venezuela, right? And like they stick the landing despite being shot at. They wear the uniform. They give every single thing for this country. And you're saying to me, okay, if you're going to, let's say, in the countrywide have a 1% tax on wealth that people are going to leave, like, come on, have some more patriotism. You have some loyalty to the country.
I mean, just a caveat to that. I mean, what are you going to spend the money on? Where's the money going to go?
Well, I
mean, look at our fucking cities, bro. Look at Chicago, St. Louis, San Francisco, LA, New York. Tons of Minnesota right now. I mean, look at all this shit. Our cities are fucking trashed. We have a fentanyl problem.
Yeah.
I mean, and where's all the money going? It sure as fuck isn't going into this country. You know where it's going? It's going to Ukraine. It's going to Israel. It's going to fight war in Venezuela. It's going everywhere but here. And we all see it. Everybody fucking sees it.
Pause there. That's the righteous indignation. That's the anger that so many are feeling right now. And it's the anger that's going to compel a lot of people to just walk away, to stay home. You know, you could be the Matt Vance Wall. You could propose something that would get you galvanized again, but are the people that are in charge actually interested in following through it? Or they just want to go do some podcasts, post on Twitter, get their followers, make sure to campaign, do some cable news appearances. Whereas the other side, the Ro Khanna, he wants to take 1% of your wealth every single year, which isn't liquid, by the way. You'd actually have to sell things in order to pay that. But because he's a communist, he gets elected to do things. He'll actually do it. Now, that's a pretty dark perspective. Things look kind of grim. They looked kind of grim for my 11-year-old, right? His team lost. He exists in a world where the good guys always win. He watches those movies, right? So maybe I can leave you with the sort of a adult perspective that I tried to give to him. It's back to the bullseye theory of controlling what you can control. There's a reason that the 10 ring in the bullseye is worth the most, and you should devote all the resources you have to knocking that 10 ring out. And if you have any extra ammo, then you expend that out afterwards. So control things that are closest to you. Make your own bed in the morning, if you will. Care about you and your family and do the little things. There's nothing my son can do to make the Buffalo Bills better, but he can make his bed. He can study in school. He can do his chores and be respectful to his mother. Similarly, as an adult, what can you do to clean up your life? What can you do then to expand things out if you have the extra bandwidth to help your community, help your schools, help your church, help your town? If you can go a little bit beyond that, help your county, help your state. And if you have the bandwidth, that's when you look at a nationwide effort. It's like painting a giant fence, Tom Sawyer style. If back to the political spectrum, we all stood in one line. If we lined up everybody on one block and one giant fence went from one end to the other, how are we going to get this fence painted? I'm just going to paint the section in my yard. And if I have some more paint left, then I'll help my neighbor. It's never going to be productive if I'm looking all the way down the block and criticizing somebody else for not doing such a good job. Control the controllables, folks. So that's going to be the end of the American Radicals podcast today, but I do have a palate cleanse. Less funny, more sad or frustrating. I mean, we're angry at our would-be government princelings right now, but at least we don't have a prince or a king like they do in our ex-girlfriend, the United Kingdom, where this was filmed when he was a prince, but now he's king. King Charles, he doesn't do anything for himself. So, I mean, at least we have this going for us. Today's palate cleanse.
The Prince of Wales has grown up in such a privileged lifestyle that he doesn't have mechanics to choose for himself anymore. Everything is done for him. His pajamas are pressed every morning so that they don't have creases in them for the next day. His shoelaces are pressed flat with an iron. His underwear is folded in a certain way. The bath towel has to be placed in a certain fashion. Prince Charles does have his valet squeeze 1 inch of toothpaste onto his toothbrush every morning. On one occasion, he rang me from his library and he said, "Oh, Paul, a letter from the Queen seems to have fallen into my waste paper bin. Would you pick it out?" The waste paper bin was there. He was sat there. I had to bend down into the paper bin and pick out the letter, put it back on his desk. "Will that be all, Your Royal Highness?" "Yes, thank you very much."
Could be way worse, guys. All right. We'll be back with you tomorrow on the American Radicals podcast. If you haven't already, give us a nice thumbs up, share, subscribe on rumble.com/amradpod, YouTube, the American Radicals podcast. If you're on one, go to the other, double up. We're trying to expand out the brand. Until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.